Some warnings arrive too late. Others arrive exactly when they're meant to. The moment a stranger placed that sealed package beside my coffee cup and whispered those 5 words, "You'll understand by morning," that's when I knew my peaceful existence was about to shatter into 1,000 pieces. The diner overlooked a valley where the main road curved into narrow lanes, surrounded by ancient oak trees that seemed to guard secrets of their own. I'd been visiting every Wednesday afternoon since my wife passed, drawn by the scent of fresh bread, the warmth of maple wood, and because the staff respected my solitude. That afternoon, my daughter Sophia and her husband Daniel sat across from me. Beyond the glass, the Colorado sky hung low and heavy. Inside, Daniel stirred his coffee, endlessly, the spoon's rhythm grating on my already frayed nerves. "You should really consider simplifying, Robert," he began. "That property is overwhelming for someone alone." Sophia agreed quickly. She had my wife's determination, but none of her warmth. "We're concerned, Dad. The expenses, the upkeep. Another harsh season is approaching." I offered them a practiced smile, one I'd refined over 18 months of grief. "I've lived there for 38 years. I understand my responsibilities." Daniel exchanged a glance with Sophia. I noticed. Fathers always do. That silent conversation that meant, not today, but soon. They rose to settle the bill, huddling close, whispering like conspirators. I remained seated, gathering my belongings, when someone appeared at my elbow. She materialized so abruptly I jerked back, nearly upsetting my cup. Mid-50s, perhaps older. Steel gray hair secured in a tight bun. Her coat too heavy for the climate. Her gaze, never wavering. She studied me like she'd been searching for decades. "Robert Mitchell," she stated, not questioning, knowing. "Yes," I answered, pulse quickening. She set a padded envelope between us. Her hand trembled slightly as she released it. "You'll need this before dawn. Don't open it here, no matter what." I started to ask her identity, how she knew me, what this all meant, but she'd already turned. By the time I stood, she'd vanished into the parking lot's chaos. I froze, staring at the package like it might detonate. Sophia and Daniel returned moments later. "Everything all right, Dad?" "Fine," I said, sliding the envelope into my jacket before they could see. My hands refused to steady. The journey home was a blur of winding mountain roads and superficial conversation about weather, property values, meaningless words. They left me at my gravel entrance, declining to come inside. I watched their taillights fade into darkness, then stood listening to wind through pine branches, sensing invisible eyes. My cabin waited at the path's end, weathered cedar siding, forest green shutters, the same structure my wife and I had restored decades ago. Inside, I secured the deadbolt, a habit I'd developed since losing her. The package sat heavy in my pocket, demanding attention. I placed it on the wooden table and studied it for an hour, without touching it. The cabin settled around me, creaking softly. Twilight surrendered to darkness. I didn't know that envelope would reveal truths buried deeper than bedrock. I only knew, for the first time since my wife's death, I feared those I trusted most. I waited until complete darkness. The delay felt necessary, though I couldn't explain why. Perhaps, hoping ignorance would protect me. Perhaps, fearing what opening it would unleash. I brewed tea I never drank, sat watching the wall clock, listened to wind testing the windows. At exactly 2:47 a.m., I broke the seal. Inside, a copper key wrapped in tissue and a torn scrap of notebook paper folded twice, the handwriting precise, careful. 3:15 a.m. Answer the call. Don't respond. Nothing else. No signature, no context. My throat constricted. I checked my watch. 2:51. Less than half an hour. The surrounding forest was silent, too silent. No distant engines, no voices, just branches swaying in blackness. At 3:14, I extinguished every light except the small lamp overhead. Its amber glow made the room's corners recede into shadow. My phone lay face up on the table, screen black. 3:15. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. The phone rang. The sound sliced through the silence. I flinched hard, chair scraping the floor. The display showed nothing, no name, no caller ID. I answered on the third ring. "Hello," I said, my voice unrecognizable. At first, only breathing, measured, deliberate, intimate. Then a voice emerged, deep, electronically masked, yet achingly familiar. Robert. My legs weakened. I'd heard that voice for over 35 years, in kitchens and gardens, in hospitals and quiet moments. I'd heard it whisper comfort and promises. It was my wife. Impossible. Don't trust Sophia. Don't trust Daniel. And don't trust the sheriff's department. I pressed my palm to my mouth to contain the sound building in my throat. You're in danger. The property is why. They need you gone. Who is this? This isn't amusing. I wish I could explain everything, but if I stay on too long, they'll trace this. Your wife didn't die how they claimed. It wasn't illness. If you surrender the land, they'll erase what she protected. The line crackled violently, the voice fractured, then returned for one final statement. The truth lies beneath you, Robert. Time is running out. The call ended. I sat frozen, phone pressed to my ear long after silence. The cabin felt transformed, exposed, vulnerable, as if the walls had thinned. I checked the call history. Nothing, no record, as if it never happened. But my hands shook, my chest ached. I didn't sleep. I sat at that table until sunrise painted the floor, understanding one terrifying certainty. Whatever killed my wife was still active, closer than I'd ever imagined. Sophia appeared the next morning, unannounced. She'd stopped calling ahead. When my wife was alive, Sophia always phoned first. Courtesy, or perhaps respect. Now she arrived as though the property already belonged to her. The pressure mounted, daily visits, concerned phone calls, legal documents appearing on my kitchen table. For your protection, they said. But protection from what? The copper key led me to my wife's hidden study, behind a false panel in the basement. Inside, documents, maps, photographs of underground tunnels beneath my property, evidence of illegal dumping, toxic waste, millions of dollars changing hands. And at the center of it all, my daughter's signature, Daniel's business records, payments to the sheriff's department. My wife had known, she'd been investigating them, and they'd killed her for it. The night they came for me, I was ready, or so I thought. Footsteps, multiple, surrounding the cabin. I grabbed the evidence container my wife had sealed and ran, into the darkness, into the forest. A beam of light caught me, and for a moment, I saw Sophia's face, twisted with panic and rage. "Give it to me, Dad. You don't understand what you're doing." But I understood everything. A car waited on the old service road, engine running, passenger door open. "Get in!" I didn't hesitate. The woman driving introduced herself. Rachel Vance. She'd worked with my wife the last year of her life, off the record, protecting the evidence that could bring them all down. Inside the container, USB drives, a notebook, and a letter in my wife's handwriting. "My dearest Robert, if you're holding this, then I failed to stop them. I'm so sorry I left you with this burden, but you were always stronger than you believed." She'd documented everything: the tunnel access, the transfers, the payments, proof that Sophia and Daniel had orchestrated it all. We set a trap. A message from my phone. "I'll return what I took. Meet at the cabin tonight. Come alone." I knew they wouldn't come alone, but they would come. That evening I stood in my kitchen, the same place where everything began. The cabin dark except for one overhead light. The container sat on the table, visible, tempting. When the knock came, my heart pounded, but my voice was steady. Sophia entered first, face pale, eyes darting. Daniel followed, and behind them, the deputy stepped in quietly, shutting the door. "You have no idea what you've done," Daniel said. I looked at my daughter. "You killed your mother." Sophia shook her head violently. "I didn't mean to. It was supposed to scare her, just enough to make her stop." Daniel's eyes flashed. She was a liability. That was all Rachel needed. The lights snapped on, voices shouted, doors burst open, federal agents flooded the room, weapons drawn. "Everyone on the ground, hands where we can see them." The deputy froze. Daniel screamed. Sophia collapsed to her knees. I stood perfectly still as they were restrained, handcuffs clicking, wrists forced behind backs. Sophia looked up at me, tears streaking her face. "Dad, please." I felt something inside me harden, not into hatred, but into clarity. "You chose this, not me, not your mother." As they led her away, she didn't fight. She only looked back once, like a child who had finally realized there would be consequences. The cabin felt hollow after they were gone. Not quiet in a peaceful way, but emptied, like something vital had been torn out. Dawn arrived slowly, pale light spilling across the floorboards, and I realized I had survived the night. That felt like an achievement I didn't know how to name. The weeks that followed moved with strange intensity. Statements, lawyers, investigators walking my land with maps and equipment. The tunnels were sealed, documented. What had poisoned the ground beneath my home was finally exposed to the air. Sophia was charged. Daniel received a longer list than either expected. The deputy resigned before the indictment reached his desk. I didn't attend the first hearing. I wasn't ready to see my daughter behind glass. Instead, I walked the land. I stood at the edge of the forest, listening to birds return to places that had once felt watched. I dug my hands into the garden soil and let the earth remind me that not everything buried is meant to stay hidden. My wife had known. She had prepared for this outcome, even when it meant accepting her own fate. She left me a trust, established quietly months before her death, enough to maintain the property, enough to protect me, enough to choose my future without fear. I cried then, not from pain, but from gratitude. In time, the property changed. I leased part of the acreage to a young couple committed to sustainable farming. I closed off areas that carried too much memory. I learned which paths I could walk again and which I needed to leave behind. I visited Sophia once, months later. She couldn't look at me at first. When she finally did, there was no anger left, only regret. I didn't forgive her that day, but I told her the truth. Your mother loved you until the end, and because of that love, she trusted me with what you couldn't be trusted with: responsibility. That was all I could give. When I left the facility, I didn't look back. Life didn't return to what it was. It became something else, stronger, quieter, mine. At 64, I learned that strength doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself when there's nothing left to rely on except your own judgment and your willingness to stand alone. The land is still here. So am I. And the truth that nearly destroyed us all now rests where it belongs. Not buried, but known. The most dangerous betrayal is not the one that comes from strangers, but the one that grows quietly, inside family. Silence may feel like protection, but truth is what keeps us alive. And no matter your age, strength doesn't fade. Sometimes it only waits for the moment it is needed most.